Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of KSP Wayfinders. It's been a while since I've actually said that sentence because the past few videos have all been KSP Revival, my new series which is a sequel to KSP Resurgence. This series is still ongoing, so I'm still going to make videos. I'm going to alternate from Revival and Wayfinders from now on, similar to what I've been doing with Resurgence and Wayfinders in the past. I just wanted to upload a few videos of Revival first, just because it's a brand new series with new content that hasn't really been on YouTube before, because it is a brand new planet pack that's just been updated. So this satellite I'm launching right now is going to be a scan satellite. It's called Observer 1. It's going to Ceti. You know, last episode I said we were going to be done with Ceti for a little bit. Well, actually we're immediately going back there. So this is definitely not the end of our whole expedition with Ceti. The whole reason I'm doing this with Ceti and not Iota is because I'm actually sending out a crew scientific rover that will actually stay on Ceti for a long amount of time and collect lots of science. I'm doing it on Ceti and not Iota because Ceti has a bit more gravity. And when I tested it on Iota, the rover didn't really have much control because the gravity was just too low to do anything. This is going to be a test rover to actually test interplanetary missions, because I want to send this very same rover over to Niven, which is the first planet I actually want to send Kerbals to. I believe it's a desert planet. I believe it's called Niven, if I recall correctly. I'm sorry if I'm mixing up my planet names in Galileo's planet pack. I did try to change the course on my own, but it wasn't really working, so I had to make a maneuver. I am using a smart ASS from MechJeb to help me out. Because the stock SAS tool is kind of annoying. Sometimes it makes you oscillate, especially when using physics warp during burns. It's just really annoying. Smart ASS fixes that, so it's a very great tool to have. It's from MechJeb. Now, like all survey scan satellites, it's best to have it in a polar orbit so it covers as much ground as possible. The reason I'm using a scansat for this is because I want a biome scan, so I want to know what biomes I'm going to visit. This also finds Easter eggs, and I'll actually discover some Easter eggs that I will be exploring later this episode. Now, for a minute, it did take me a while to actually get this to work, because I had no idea what I was doing. For a bit, I thought I just had to open it up and it'd start working, but it turns out there's actually a drop-down that I'm completely missing, because for some reason KSP community fixes hides everything in drop-downs, and for some reason I'm too stupid to notice. Eventually I do figure it out and actually start scanning this moon. I have to get a really high-res scan. Well, it's not a high-res scan, it's just a biome map and Easter egg locations. As that probe scans the surface of Ceti, I'd like to come back to Wanderer 1, which is my super deep space, long-range probe powered by a nuclear reactor and cesium ionic engines. Well, it's only one ionic engine. This is Otho, the very first gas giant in the Gales, not the Gale system, the Gales planet, the Ciro system. Ciro is the star in Galileo's planet pack. Otho has a rather yellowish appearance to it. Very desaturated though, has 3 very interesting moons that I all plan to do flybys of this very episode. I do have to use infinite electricity while doing burns with persistent thrust because for some reason this is a very annoying bug I have to deal with every time I use persistent thrust with electrical engines. It keeps kicking me out of time warp thinking I'm out of electric charge even though I have a very abundant supply of it. I mean, with the electric nuclear reactor I do have on this, it's cutting it pretty close. It's just barely enough to power this engine and the entire probe at full throttle. It still keeps kicking me out of time warp. Another weird thing about this probe is that it actually doesn't have enough electrical reserves to transmit an entire scientific experiment. I mean, sometimes it will, but it depends on the experiment because sometimes they have more data to transmit. So I actually have to go on the antenna and allow partial. So it'll actually run out of electric charge for a couple seconds before the nuclear reactor can generate more, and that will allow the probe to transmit the entirety of this science experiment. Should have packed a few batteries on here, but I completely forgot that. Thankfully, that didn't actually impede this entire mission, so the probe still works. As I previously stated, Otho has 3 moons. The first one I'm going to explore is Augustus, which I believe is the largest moon in the system. It has a somewhat thin atmosphere, and it's a rather interesting moon. It's rather orange in color. I was kind of hoping to land a space plane there later, but the atmosphere is just too thin. I mean, I might be able to make something work with 0.2 atmospheres of pressure, if not 0.3, but 0.1 atmospheres is just too thin. It is 0.1 atmospheres if I recall correctly. I might have gotten that wrong. It's just been a while since I've actually played KSP Wayfinders, the install, that is. I'm just going through a bunch of footage I've previously recorded. In fact, this very footage that you're looking at right now was recorded all the way back in March. That's like 3 months ago. It's just ridiculous. As I do a close flyby of Augustus, I have to make sure I collect all the science I possibly can, because this probe is going to send so much science back to the Galileo Space Center. Another reason I want to actually send that rover over to Ceti is so I can collect a whole lot more science so I can finally construct my first interplanetary vessel. I probably won't need tons of science to construct one, but I really want to have a long-range interplanetary vessel that I'll keep using for the rest of the series, or at least a good chunk of it, because I want to go very, very far. This next moon is called Hephaestus. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a rather odd moon with a bunch of weird surface features. I must say, it really looks... It's one of the better looking vacuum moons I've seen. Most vacuum moons just look like a rock, but this one looks like a very cool rock. The kind of rock you'd find walking around and decide to take home just because it has some cool patterns on it. You actually have a really, really close flyby. It's almost as if you can reach down and touch the moon. Barely have your hand blown off in the process because you're going at 900 meters per second relative to the surface. Or orbital velocity, if I recall correctly, because it takes a orbit on the nav ball. Though, I'm sure it wouldn't have been too far off from the actual surface velocity. It may accuse me of cheating by using infinite electricity while doing persistent thrust, but I have to do this because I have to use this to do persistent thrust or else it'll kick me out. I cannot use this engine without persistent thrust because the TWR is just abysmal. In fact, any burn would probably take ages. In fact, I believe the burn that got me out of here took like over an hour. And I just do not have the time or attention span to sit on my computer at 4 times physics warp for 15 minutes. I just can't do that. Besides, what if something goes wrong and the Kraken attacks me at 4 times physics warp? Maybe I get a little risky and do 16 times physics warp and destroy Kerbin. Not Kerbin. Kerbin doesn't exist in this planet pack. Destroy the entire Zero star system. Oh, enough yapping. This is the final moon of the Otho system. This is Jenna. It's another rather cool-looking vacuum world. Probably like another rocket sea laying next to Hephaestus that you decide to take home. Sorry if I'm butchering these names. I have no idea how to pronounce stuff. Flyby, in terms of science, is completely successful despite a few terrain glitches with ghosts of the entire moon showing and clipping into the terrain. Maybe it's a glitch with the parallax configs, because I recall the parallax configs not being the best for Galileo's planet pack, at least for parallax continued. Now, that is the entirety of the Otho system explored. Now it's time to move on to the next gas giant, that being Gauss. Now, Gauss is much further out, and unfortunately, I can't really get a maneuver node within a reasonable time just to get there normally, so I do have to perform a very, very odd maneuver just to reach and get out there properly in a reasonable amount of time. Thankfully, I do have plenty of Delta V to waste in this probe. However, despite this, it'll still take me a couple of years to actually get there, so I suppose we can just forget about this Pro for a while and just focus on other things. I will set an alarm so I actually remember to transfer to the probe and actually use it and capture into an orbit instead of letting it drift into space forever. This maneuver will get us to Gus much quicker than any other one, but it will waste a whole lot of Delta V. Thankfully I do have an abundance of it, so I can really perform really whack maneuvers like these without a worry in the world. Back at the R&D, you can pick up a few tech nodes, the biggest one being the Advanced Plasma Propulsion, which unlocks a whole bunch of really massive plasma-powered engines, which are very efficient despite having very low thrust. And I'm going to use one of the engines unlocked in that tech node to construct my very first crewed interplanetary vehicle, which I decided to call the Odyssey. Now this next rocket is actually going to be launching the rover I was talking about previously all the way over to Ceti. I've called this the Panda Rover because I put some flashlights on the front of it to actually illuminate the path ahead of the Kerbals. So just a bunch of headlights, and they reminded me of panda ears, so I decided to call this the Panda Rover because if you look at the front, it looks like a panda. Besides, a whole lot of other parts in Kerbal Space Program are named after animals, such as the cheetah, terrier, wolfhound, rocket engines. So why not continue that naming convention, except name entire rovers and spacecraft after it? This entire launch was performed with a Blizzard 7 very heavy launch vehicle, powered by 7 Orca Parallax rocket engines for the first stage, and 5 Ulysses cryogenic Hydrolox engines for the upper stage. The Hydrolox engines are very efficient, provide a very good amount of thrust, so they're just the best vacuum engines for chemical rocket launches I have at the moment. I could use Methalox, but I haven't really unlocked many Methalox engines yet, because for some reason, with the gradual progression tech tree, you don't unlock Methalox propulsion until the very end of the chemical rocket tech line. I mean, I do have one Methalox rocket that is for some reason unlocked earlier in progression, but I'm going to unlock all those Methalox engines very, very soon and use them for my next wave of heavy launch vehicles. I've actually selected a landing site for this entire rover, because that scansat, I think I forgot to hit record for the entire map view. I actually found a few Easter eggs, and I'm landing this rover right next to one. I've actually marked a waypoint location for the Easter egg. I'll be exploring 2 of them today. They're both rather interesting and unique Easter eggs. I'm not going to talk about them too much right now, because I don't want to spoil the rest of this episode. It's a lot less maneuverable with the massive upper stage attached, but we don't need that anymore. We can just use a sky crane now. For the future interplanetary mission to Niven, this sky crane for this rover will be slightly different. In fact, it'll actually have parachutes. Niven does have a thin atmosphere, but it's too thin to utilize entirely parachutes for a landing, so the engines will remain to ensure a smooth landing that doesn't explode the wheels. Very smooth landing indeed. Now the sky crane's completely used up, it's time just to discard it. This is the Panda Rover on Ceti. Look how cool it is. Its entire way of getting back home is exploding in the background, doesn't even turn around. To actually send the crew over, I am using a Blizzard 7S, which stands for the Blizzard 7 Slim heavy launch vehicle. It's made mostly out of procedural parts. The actual lander I'll be using to send the crew to the surface of Ceti is actually going to be the same lander I'm going to be using them to land on Niven. I've actually tested it, it's going to work out. And it's one of my better looking landers. It's powered by a Hydrolox Aerospike, in fact. I decided using Aerospike because Niven has a whole lot of different atmospheric curves. It's a somewhat thin atmosphere at sea level, and then it quickly fades out to a vacuum. I just feel like an Aerospike is best for that. be honest, I don't really need an aerospike, but I do want to use some of the aerospikes offered by a Blue Dog Design Bureau. It's very efficient while being a very compact engine. So it's one of the best engines for landers like this. For the command pod, I'm using the Allura Biconic command capsule from Near Future Spacecraft. It's rather an odd command pod because the heat shield is completely on in a different way. Also, instead of having the standard 1.25 meter top node for docking ports and parachutes, you're actually supposed to rely on this little service bay on the back for your docking ports and your scientific experiments, or whatever else you can put on there. In terms of re-entry, it's not unlike a flying bullet just going straight through the atmosphere, because that's what it looks like to people who zoom in with a telescope as it's re-entering the atmosphere. Because instead of coming in backwards like a normal command capsule with a heat shield, the heat shield actually comes with a command pod and is completely on sideways. The concept does seem pretty cool. I believe it's an actual NASA concept that was cancelled, unfortunately. But in terms of 2.5 times rescale, it actually doesn't really work that well because this part is not balanced for it. It doesn't produce the kind of drag you would see a normal heat shield producing. And also the mix of the ablator being different and the overall heat resistance being slightly lower. It actually doesn't really work that well for 2.5 times rescale, and I did have to cheat just to get this back, but that won't be until next episode, so just pretend I didn't say that and admit to cheating. In order to actually land where the Panda rover is, I do have to set it as my target and make sure my descending node is as close to 0 as possible. This technique is used for orbital rendezvous, but it also works for landing on a surface space or near a surface space or any other place on a surface. To be honest, I'm a massive fan of aerospikes. I just think they really look cool. The only drawback, at least in this install, is that they all use liquid hydrogen, which is it's not dense at all. So you need a whole lot of tankage to actually get the amount of delta V that you would like. Thankfully, I actually land very, very close to the rover, so we can just come in reverse and make sure the little EVA gate is as close to the crew as possible to minimize the amount of distance I actually have to travel. Now, one mistake I actually made with this lander is I didn't actually put any probe cores on it, so for the entire duration of this rover mission, it'll actually be completely uncontrollable. Now, in terms of from a realism standpoint, this would not work with a Hydrolox lander because it would all just boil off, especially with those tiny solar panels. They would not provide the power needed to keep this entire tank cool. With this Kerbal Space Program, I disabled boil off for my own convenience and to avoid electric charge glitches. So, boil off doesn't matter. Now, we are still a ways away from the actual Easter egg I plotted out as a waypoint. Now, while I could use Bon Voyage and just go there instantly, I actually want to go take this thing for a little joyride first. First, I did see if this rock was actually mineable, because sometimes with Kerbal Space Program, I believe it's the Breaking Ground DLC, can actually pick up rocks and take them home, but unfortunately this rock wasn't small enough to take home, or wasn't configured properly. I guess my headcanon could say it was too big to take home. Now this entire rover is actually powered by a nuclear reactor. The solar panels are just there for redundancy, and just to provide a little bit of electric charge. with the scansat map view, I can actually zoom in and see how far we are from the actual Easter eggs. The waypoint I placed for this entire Easter egg was a little bit off, so once I arrived there, I had to get my bearings using the map and actually see where I had to go to find the Easter egg. I'm a little bit afraid to use physics warp because with wheels and rover travel, physics warp can be very deadly. For some reason, this rover keeps wanting to steer to one direction for some reason. I have no idea how to fix this. It's just a weird bug, I think. Maybe the center of mass is off. I have no idea. I have to make a sharp turn to actually keep going towards the direction where the Easter egg is. As we start going down the hill, the Easter egg comes to view. As they approach, the Kerbals can very clearly see that this is a memorial to Neil Armstrong, the first astronaut on the moon. I do believe this Easter egg also appears in the stock game on the Mun. It's a great Easter egg paying homage to the very people that make space exploration possible and very popular in the first place. Now, there's still another Easter egg I would like to explore on Ceti, and I'm actually going to use Bon Voyage to travel over there. And Bon Voyage is a very convenient mod for rover travel, because it allows you to pick any point on the entire surface of the planet or moon you're on, and then you can easily just drive there using time warp. However, to actually use Bon Voyage, you need a part with a Bon Voyage controller module in the config settings, and unfortunately, I didn't actually have any of those parts on my rover, so I had to go into the configs of the parts and actually edit in the module for the controller in the command part of this entire rover. So now I can actually use Bon Voyage. Of course, I had to relaunch the game and load a quick saving. Bam! Now there's a whole controller thing for Bon Voyage there. Wonder how that got there. To use Bon Voyage, you just put up this control panel. Of course, you have to activate the controller first. Then you just click wherever you want to go, or use your waypoint as a destination. You can also use other spacecraft as a destination, but if you choose to do that, be sure to set your location a little bit farther away from that, because if you just set as your target and then just go there, you'll end up clipped into your target, and then everything will explode. Now, once you actually start traveling, you can go to the tracking station, just time warp until you actually reach your target, and then you get to click the little button over here, and there you are. We're at our destination. I actually had to use Bon Voyage twice to actually get here, because when I first did it, it didn't put me as close as I really wanted to, but I just had to cut that extra part out just to make the video not take too long. And here it is, a Mung Arch. Or is it a Ceti arch? Because it's not on the Mun, it's on Ceti. In fact, what is the Mun? These are not Kerbals, these are Galileans. This is Galileo's planet pack. The Mun... In fact, the entirety of Kerbal probably doesn't even exist to these guys. Or maybe it does. What really is the lore in Galileo's planet pack? Is it an alternate universe? Is it the future? I have no idea. Maybe these are mysteries that we'll solve later in the series. This Easter egg is very nice and fancy and all, but there is a minor problem. We are actively sliding off a cliff right now, despite actually having brakes on. Thankfully, time warp puts our entire craft at a standstill. So we're going to time warp until we have communications with the Rescale Space Center so it can transmit all of our science back home. Most of this mission was just sitting around in Time Warp. This is just basically a glorified surface base with wheels. I mean, it can travel to different biomes to collect a lot more science, but a whole lot of this mission wasn't spent traveling. This sliding issue is a big problem, but we don't really have to worry about it later in this mission because we won't be on an incline for the majority of this entire road trip. As this mission continues, this rover will visit more biomes on Ceti. Eventually the crew will go home, and then this rover, the same design, will actually be sent to another planet. But unfortunately, that'll have to wait until future episodes. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this one, and I'll see you all in the next one.